Well, once again, good morning, everyone. We're so glad that you're with us as we continue our Sustaining Generosity Kentucky initiative. This morning, we'll be learning about building a narrative style budget, and we have with us the honor of having the Reverend Bruce Barkhauer, who I believe has determined that he will not retire in August, that he will go on a couple more years because he's doing such great work. But no, he's retiring in a couple of months, so we've got to drain as much wisdom as we can from him while we have the opportunity. And so without any further ado, I want to present Bruce, and Bruce can kind of tell you about his journey, and then he's going to lead us in the narrative style budget.
It's great to be with you all. For most of you, we've encountered each other somewhere along the way, but I do serve currently as the Minister for Faith and Giving for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And by virtue of that office, I hold the title of Executive Director of the Center for Faith and Giving, which is our stewardship ministry, created out of a blue ribbon panel on finance back when, if you know your disciple history, about 16 years ago, we dissolved the Church Finance Council, and the various components of its ministries went to live in different places in the church. And the stewardship education piece they did was carved out and set aside to create this position and this ministry, and one that I've been doing for 14 and a half years and will soon be retiring from. But this has been a great experience, and I have really enjoyed it. I am going to attempt to share my screen. Let's see here. I want to be able to call up my PowerPoint. So hang on just a second. Does not seem to want to let me do that, but give me a minute here, folks. I apologize. Normally this is a little more smooth than this. Try again. There it is. And get up into the menu the way it is sitting in there. It's hard to get to the things I want to click on. Slideshow, there it is. All right, can everybody see that? Does that, everybody's good. I see a thumbs up, so that is great. Let me close that little box so I can see what you're looking at. I think we're good to go. So the question really is, what is a narrative budget? Many of you have probably worked on these before at some point in your church ministry, have tried to develop something like this. Narrative is a technical term, and I start out with that because sometimes I'll see churches print our narrative budget as the title to what they're doing, and that's really more of a technical term of the type of budget it is. You're probably better off to call it your missional budget or your mission focused budget, because that's really mostly what that is about. A narrative budget does not replace a line item budget, and that is important to note, because you still need the line item budget from which you build your narrative story. The difference is that the narrative budget isn't emphasizing what things cost, but it's talking about the investments we make in particular areas of our ministry as a church that relate to our mission and vision statement. And that's what's most important to remember, is that it's tied to your mission and vision. Your whole budget process is really, when we talk about how to build a budget, it's important to know that our starting place is not how many dollars do we need, but it's what is our mission, what is our why, and why does it matter? And the budget is a plan then to be able to execute that. It's looking at the components, the action ideas in our mission statement, and building a story around that. A regular budget, a narrative, or a line item budget is just created by the finance team. It's very important because, again, it's how you're going to execute that ministry. It's a tool for the treasurer as much as anybody, because it's how expenditures are to be directed, what accounts they're charged to, and what are the parameters or the limits on how much can come out of a certain area of identified financial carve out, if you will. There may be a trigger then if it exceeds that the treasurer needs to say, we got to have a meeting. The board or the finance committee or somebody has to meet to deal with that. Budgets are managed tools. They represent the assigned estimated cost for personnel, for your teams, your committees, and hopefully you keep a record so that you can measure month over month, year over year, and just regular budgeting aside from the narrative, so that you can make comparisons month to month, month over month, and year over year. A lot of times you'll learn when it's the right time to panic and when no panic is necessary. If you know that there are trends in the way in which the money works, and particularly when those trends are down, that then there's a trend that at the end of the year, those go back up, and that would be normal because 30% of charitable giving comes in November and December. So, that's important to remember. They allow the board, when you have a good budget, a good line item budget, it allows the board to do its fiduciary responsibility of making sure that there's adequate funding for the ministry. Talked about managing our budgets, and sometimes they require adjustments. But hopefully at the end of the day, a budget reveals what our priorities are. We should be able to look at a budget and be able to tell what's important to the church. The problem is that what we usually show people looks like this. And I'm going to put up the window so I can see all of you. What does that budget tell you about the church's priorities? You can unmute and we'll just popcorn this. What do you see there? Is it real clear what their priorities are?
It looks like it's just an operational budget, taking care of the building and the finances.
Right. And notice that it's all about expense centers, right? This is what it costs. And that's important information to have. And in the planning, we need to be able to do our due diligence around that. But to look at this then, well, it looks like the biggest things you spend money on are salaries. So that must be your priority, when in fact, that's not really reflective of who you are. And notice that mission was listed last. Mission, in my opinion, should always be listed first when we're doing a budget, because it is our priority. It's what we do. So you look at that budget. What does it tell you about the church priorities? Well, not very much, really. The purpose of a narrative budget then is to tell you that story. It's to link money to mission and to ministry. It helps us assess our plan and the balance of our investments. So let's say we have 4 areas of emphasis in our mission statement. We may see that one area gets 45% of the church's resources. Well, if that's your number one priority, that makes sense. But if you're looking to balance the church's priorities, then that tells you that, well, we're not investing perhaps enough in this other area that we've claimed is an area we want to do ministry with. So what adjustments do we need to make to bring that picture, if we will, a pie chart, more into balance, if that's appropriate for your circumstance? But it allows you to map that. The idea is that it tells a story about how we're planning to use people's money and investments to make ministry happen. You can even, as you tell a narrative budget, incorporate things that in this area, our plan is to launch a new ministry that will do this, that, or the other thing. And that's named in there. And I'm going to show you a really fine example here in a minute. So, and that's what we'll spend most of our time on. What we want to do is inspire people to give. That line item budget does not inspire people to give. When I look at that, that is not terribly inspiring. Wanting me to respond and give. You want me to know about something you do that has an impact, and that will inspire me to give. You want to tie the actions that you're doing to your vision and mission statement, which means you're regularly wanting to revisit that mission statement. The church is changing rapidly. Does our vision and mission fit who we are now? Does it fit the circumstances in which we're doing our ministry? Does it is it right for the environment that we're in, or the assets we have, and the things that need to be done? Most churches center still around worship, education, mission, and relationship building, fellowship, community building, whatever you'd like to call it. That those are our priorities, and so we want to pull the things in our budget that feed those particular aspects of our mission, so that we connect that for folks. And to do that, then to do this well, we need to do a time study. We need to have our staff look at how they spend their time in relationship to the church's mission and vision priorities. And that's for all staff. We need to do the same thing for our building. How is our building serving as a platform for mission? And we want to tell that story, or it may tell us that, our property really is an expense because we're not doing anything with it through the week. We're just coming here to worship and trying not to have the pipes freeze during the week when nobody's here in the winter. That's a stewardship issue about the resources and assets we have. But then it also becomes a missional understanding that what could we use our space for? Who could we partner with for things that need to be done in our community? And then our building is a platform for mission. So if you're already doing things, you want to know how much time you're spending with those things, so you can calculate what percentage of the budget is supporting those things. Because if you're using your building, that means you've got utility costs, you've got custodial costs, you've got paper goods costs, you've got insurance, you've got perhaps a non-reverting maintenance fund that the budget feeds every year. So when the air conditioner goes down, you can fix it without having to do a capital campaign. It depends on how you're structured and how healthy your finances are. But that's the kind of information that allows us to make this. So it might look like this. Maybe the senior minister, maybe there are several priorities that can be teased out of the mission statement. And we start with the senior minister, and 20% of their time is spent in worship. That's probably a little light if you're the senior pastor and have preaching responsibilities and administrative responsibilities. But for the sake of easy math here, we'll say 20%. And so of your total package, of the minister's total salary and benefits, housing, all of that, 20% of that is the minister's resourcing that. So in the narrative, we're going to move 20% of the investment we make in having a minister into the other investments we're making for our worship ministry and the way in which we're engaging in that. If they spend 10% of their time teaching and discipleship's a priority, that might be it. Oftentimes in communities, the senior minister is asked to be the church's representative, takes the role of ambassadorship from the church sometimes in engaging with mission partners in the community. So we're going to take, in this case, 15% of the time that senior minister to look at our serving others portion of our vision. Their expense, the investment we make in their salary, et cetera, goes to that. Same thing if you have a care ministry, if you're doing evangelism, whatever it is, right? You want to break it up and pull the salaries, and you'll do the same thing if you have an associate You'll do the same thing for your custodian. How is the secretary? How is his or her time, an administrative assistant, how is their time being used to support these ministries? I know a lot of time goes into bulletin production at some of our churches that still use bulletins. Well, that's a part of the time that supports the mission, the element of worship within our mission statement. And so we want to be sure that we move all of those investments we make in our budget to that area. So this takes some time, it takes some work. The other thing, of course, it needs is pictures to tell the story. So you've got to have some time, and you should be doing now throughout the year, getting pictures of events and things you're doing, and they just don't have to be grin and grip pictures of people's faces next to each other, and trying to look nice and warm and friendly. Which, if you see how most church pictures get selected, there's always one sourpuss you can always see. But here you can use hands, and you can, take pictures of canned goods or whatever, the kinds of hammers and nails, if you do habitat, that kind of thing. And people working that help tell the story. You've got to use some words, but you don't want so many words that they can't take in the images that they're seeing. So you would do the same thing then. Once you've done that part of it, you then say, okay, what are all the costs that go into worship? So we're going to pull custodian costs in, bring choir director. So often we put our musicians again just in this space called personnel, which feels like an expense center. And that's what it costs us to have a pastor, which is really not a good way to look at what we're asking the pastor to do. The pastor is helping us live out our mission. In this case, the musicians, their only purpose is to enhance worship. That's what we hire them for, unless they're doing some other programming during the week not related to worship. The choir director and musicians are all of their numbers are pulled into that part of your budget. So this takes time, it takes some effort, but it is well worth it, because it does let you see how it's a way to dashboard how well you're living out your mission and vision, and what kind of resources are you moving to those various elements. And what I like to tell folks is that if it's done real well, like the one I'm going to show you here in a minute, it's not just an in-house product. When we would take ours to the mayor and to our councilman and to our township trustee, and say, this is the kind of way we contribute to the community. Because I had the mayor once say, it was many years ago, several mayors ago in our town, say, you don't pay any taxes for all that great property. And yeah, that's right. And it became obvious then I needed to take this document, this narrative style budget, to the mayor to say, but here's what we do. Here's how we enhance the life of the community. These are the ways in which we're engaging. And you can also do another thing with the narrative budget, is that you can also ask all of your people who are volunteering all over the community to tell you how many hours a week they volunteer and where. And the benefit of this then is that every community there's a dollar value for volunteer hours, and they are regional. You can Google it and find out that, in your community, a volunteer hour is worth maybe $22.75 an hour. And you can multiply then all the hours per week and figure it out over the year, what the dollar contribution is your people make in the community doing Matthew 25 kinds of ministries. This is a really important thing, I think. And most of us have more mature congregants, and they're retired and they have time, and they do volunteer at all of these agencies. And so we want to gather that information, and somewhere in the budget, we want to report that, in addition to, actual dollars spent and invested by our congregation. There's this much additional value that we put in through our volunteer hours. And that's a good thing to know. And I think the Chamber of Commerce needs to know what we do where we are and why it matters. There are other nonprofits who can be partners for us if they're not already, who we'd want to share what we're doing. And of course, we want people who are thinking about joining our church to see this story. They're going to be much more interested in that story that's told in the narrative than they are, 5 pages of Excel spreadsheets. That's not why they're joining your church. They want to be engaged in something that matters, that feeds them, that allows them to contribute to the community. And your narrative tells that story. So that's what you want to do. And I would make sure that, any local granting agencies, if you have a community foundation, I'd make sure that they got copies of this. And that you make an appointment to sit down and talk with some of these people, maybe even some of your business leaders in town, to just get to know them and to help them get to know you as church and what you do. Those connections down the road can be very meaningful. And it can elevate how your church is perceived in the community, and that may help you sometimes get some benefits or some help that you may need for a project or mission you're doing, and that's never wasted energy. And it doesn't just have to be the pastor who does that. There are all kinds of folks in our churches have connections in different places, and they can take the time to do that and share that story. Because what we hope is that your church has an amazing story to tell, and that this will become the tool by which you can do that. So I'm going to stop this for the moment and call you all back up and ask what questions you have before we're going to walk through a very fine example. And then we're also going to walk through the way they have tied it to their board reporting in an Excel spreadsheet. It's pretty fascinating what they've done. And so we'll share that. But first, are there any questions on what I've laid out so far? Pretty straightforward, pretty clear stuff. And some of you have done these before, so you have some idea what that's about. All right, I am going to get out of one presentation and we'll now go to another. See how clever I can be here with all this Zoom stuff. Here's what we're going to share. Excellent. All right. Need to be sure that everybody can see this. I can't see you while I have it up. And I'm going to try and pull you up there. Corey, I can see you up in the window. Can you see it? Great. Okay, I'll make that go away so I have room. This is First Christian Church, Birmingham, Alabama, where Beth Thomason and Robin Blakemore serve as pastors. Beth is a senior minister. This is a congregation we began working with Generosity Plus a couple of years ago. And part of that process we do, and we're doing Generosity Plus, walking with the congregation individually, is we help them build their narrative style budget. And they did a remarkable job. They call it their Pathways Report. They call it a narrative budget. They don't call it a missional budget, because there's an underlying theme in the church about pathways to discipleship. There's an emphasis on discipleship and spiritual growth in the church, and developing those disciplines we call spiritual disciplines. And so they call this their pathway report. On the outside of that front page, this is a nicely done fold over large sheet of paper. It's bigger than a legal size. And it's in color and it's printed on good paper. That's kind of important. But you'll see on the front page their vision statement, their mission statement for the church is: we embrace God's creation, we explore God's purpose for our lives, and extend love and respect to all. Now those are their priorities as a church. That's how they describe who they are and what God has called them to be in Birmingham. And part of that is to be an open and affirming church in Birmingham, Alabama. And so it puts them in a rather unique and particular place from which they can speak to the issues they believe are important relative to inclusion around the table. There aren't a lot of other churches they're competing with for this, so this can be a part of their story in a rich way. And you'll see how they've done that. When you open up that cover, then they happen to use our campaign materials from the Center for Faith and Giving 2 years ago, or was it last year? It was called "Because of You, Our Church Changes Lives," material that we produce. And they talk about the nature of generosity. And you can see how they've done this and how they've color coded this "because of you." And that's going to become important as we look at this. So we embrace God's creation as we worship in community and develop holy friendships. So notice now that that mission statement has just opened up. That now they've given us 2 insights into the way in which they do that. We explore God's purpose for our lives by discovering our sacred purpose and practicing dynamic spirituality. So you see how now this is starting to open up a little bit as to how they live this out in their community. We extend love and respect to all through our joyful generosity and sharing our faith with others. So then they describe what the Pathways report is, and they talk about those values: embrace, explore, extend, and then how they subdivide those as a way of talking about the total investment. Now look at these pictures. I mean, these are fun. These people are actually having fun. Important when we're getting these pictures and putting them out, and there's children and there's bright colors, and I like it. So here's that first word we used, embrace. And notice what they've put under that: worship, music, live stream, preaching, creation care, small groups, their potlucks. This is how they've broken embrace out under those separate categories of worshiping community and holy friendships. And again, pictures that pop out, that show me that in a particular kind of way. Stuff for me to read, but it's not overwhelming. And you see now how embrace begins to live itself out, and you can see how much they're investing in those areas. Under embrace, they've got holy friendships, about 9% of their budget, if you can see that, and worshiping community is about 19% of their total budget, and that's been drawn from those salaries and costs to what they believe it actually costs to do worship, what that investment is to make that happen, what it takes to do these fellowship events, how much of the building, how much of the pastor's time, how much of our program energy goes in this way. And, I love these pictures. We got baptism and the joy that's in that picture. We got little kids with children's worship and wonder. We've got somebody holding a glass of wine, which we'll assume is for communion. Otherwise, it might be on the other side of the page. But that's really what we're talking about here. And the dreaming together for the future. Notice there's future story here: intergenerational all-church retreat and strengthen regional connections. That's all a part of what they want to have happen. So I'm going to stop and see if that by itself generates any questions or ideas for you. Okay, well, then we'll go to the next page.
May I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
So like the subtitle, like under the word explore there at the top,
Yeah.
teaching, hospitality, serving, Bible study. Is there like a model that we could draw from that kind of already puts things together in categories like that?
Well, this would be one I would call to your attention, is this a way to do it and see it.
Yeah.
It depends, of course, on your own mission statement, and what are the things you actually do or are striving to do that fit that way. Does that make sense? That,
Yes.
they've taken explore, and then they show sacred purpose, which is they're shaping people's lives, understanding their spiritual gifts. They have leadership retreats to equip people. That's all a part of discipleship for their purpose and leadership. And then, this other side are the things they do that feed them spiritually, in developing holy practices, so that there's a dynamism to their faith, a vitality to it that they believe is created in community and teaching. So pieces of that budget it's fractional. It's all, you got to be good at fractions here to be able to have this make sense. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it helps a lot, and it also allows creativity.
Oh,
So
absolutely. This should
we
be
are
fun.
locked
Yeah.
into something.
Yeah.
So whatever makes sense for our board works then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Bruce,
so
can I ask you a question?
yes, go ahead.
So I'm curious because this is really helpful. It almost feels like this is like a strategic planning report as well.
Sure, it is.
And so that I don't know if the strategic planning process is something you want to undertake every year, but it seems like there are aspects of that in writing a narrative budget. How much of what's in this document or what they did sort of pre-existed? Like, so they obviously already had a mission statement,
Right.
they already have it broken down, that they already have the dreaming together bullet points, and how much of it was created for the narrative budget process itself?
A lot of it was created for the narrative budget process, but it reflects their planning.
Okay.
They've come through their visioning process just a couple of years ago, had real clarity on it. They went open and affirming, which changed the dynamics of their composition of folks and money available for a little while. I mean, that we've done this, we know what that's about. But this reflected, you're absolutely right. It is a strategic plan, and every year building a budget is essentially a strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to rewrite the components of that plan, but you're making sure that what you're putting your money to is what your priorities are, and what programs are effective and may need help, or maybe can spare some, resource to go someplace else to launch something else. But a budget is a planning piece, and there's a red thread that runs horizontally through every budget process, through every congregation's life, if they're doing it well. And that's that mission value statement. And we're holding everything accountable to that line. Everything we do, we ask the question, how does this help us further our mission? What's our mission, right? How does this give us greater impact? What's the impact of our why? What difference does it make? So that conversation is continual in the congregation, should be with the financial planners and ministry program planners. And so this will adjust a little bit, and elements of the story will change, but those basic pieces of dynamic spirituality, sacred purpose will stay the same, but there may be new insight, new little pieces that we add to it. And again, you see how this lays out in such a way that you've got, sacred purpose, that's 8%, and dynamic spirituality is 11%. But, together that's 19% of their budget is going to this missional priority of the 6 they've identified and the 3 they've put them under. If I'm making sense the way I'm saying that.
Yeah, it does. And if I may follow up, and I'm sorry if this is getting too much into the weeds, but I'm curious to know, do you feel like a church could do a narrative budget if they don't have a strategic plan? So a church may have a mission statement. Okay, that's what I was wondering. It seems like that you have to have not just the mission statement, but also sort of the meat on the bones of that mission statement of how you plan on living it out before you can do a narrative budget. Is that
That's
true?
right, because you have to have a story to tell.
Right. Okay.
This is telling the story. Well, if you're not living out your mission and vision, and you don't have a plan each year for how you're going to do that,
yeah,
then you're right. You can't do
Okay.
this well.
Okay.
You can do it in general terms. I get, lots of students all the students come through my class in Lexington have to do a narrative budget. And the most common mistake students make is they want to list things, under worship, rather than talk about what happens to us in worship, or be able to identify something is said about their worship experience that's meaningful and draws me into the story. They'll say, well, we do an Easter sunrise service and a Maundy Thursday service and a community Ash Wednesday service and a community Thanksgiving, and it's like they're kind of just trying to justify that, yeah, we do a lot of worship, where instead of telling the impact of that worship, Don't tell me about, the 11,000 pounds of canned goods you collected. If that's all you're going to tell me about Betty, who got some of those canned goods because she went to the food, tell me a story of somebody whose life is being impacted by that. And you'll see how they've done this within the congregation in a moment.
Thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So then extend, right? So here we are. They're dreaming together again. That's future story stuff. The joyful generosity, faith worth sharing pieces are the fixed stuff, right? That they're doing now. This is what we're engaged in now. And again, colorful, nice, fun pictures that tell a story to me. I want to know about that colorful umbrella and those children, right? Obviously, we're doing something with kids and we're giving them creative, free playtime and a healthy, safe environment. I mean, that picture tells a number of potential stories for me. And if you draw just a few key words out for me in that, I'm going to get it, right? And that's going to move me, as opposed to, well, yeah, my utility bill went up too. So I'm not real excited about helping you with yours. Light bills are not sexy. Many of you have heard me say this multiple times. People don't care how much you spend on toilet paper. They just want it in the restroom when they go and need it. Right? They really don't care. Yes, you'll have one or two people who want to talk about every single line in the budget, and they'll want to hold up a meeting on a $400,000 budget, on a $400 line item, right? I mean, there's always somebody like that. So you're always going to have the narrative budget alongside of the line item budget, so people can see it and ask questions, and they know you're not trying to hide something. That we've got folks who unfortunately don't trust us as well as they should, and they think we're hiding something when we tell this is our story and this is what we're asking the church to adopt. It has the numbers, but we've done it in a very different kind of way. And no, we're not trying to hide the fact that we just bought Corey a condominium down in Tampa. Some reason people think that stuff, that we're really trying to pull one over on them. And no, here it is. And there are the numbers. Here's my favorite part of this particular narrative. First of all, you see they've color coded everything, and we're drawn back to that now, and we see how the pieces fit together of the priority, the 6 priorities of their ministry, the percentage and the dollars. So nobody can say we are not telling them how much this costs, right? There are the costs. But look at the quotes they've drawn out from members of their church and the community as they tie to a specific piece of that pie. When my family moved from Puerto Rico, First Christian Church surrounded us with God's love. Every person was so welcoming and concerned about our well-being. The people here are my true friends. That's a much different way to talk about the cost of having fellowship suppers, isn't it? I mean, that's just a way different talk about it. Teaching Sunday school forced me to read the Bible more. See, now we're in education and dynamic spirituality. Even more important, interactions and discussions among Sunday school members have taught me to listen to others' perspectives, challenged me to grow in my own discipleship. That's a great way to talk about spiritual growth, isn't it? And it's a great way to be disciple, that we're actually listening to each other. And we're not just swallowing whole cloth some, 7-point statement that somebody wrote that they think these are the things we need to believe. It's a great way to talk about it. Somebody talk about their generosity. I'm happy to give, whether time or resources, because I believe those gifts will have a positive impact on the lives of others. Generosity teaches me to always trust that God is transforming my gifts into blessing for God's word. These are their peers in the church saying these things about what the church means to them, what the church does. And that's really powerful stuff. Because what I'm really going to invite people into now is I'm not going to ask them for money. I'm going to ask them to pray about, to discern how God is calling them to invest in and be a part of what God is doing in this church. Where, what's your stake in this? Are you going to dedicate time to pray for it? Are you going to accept working on a team that does one of these ministries? Are you going to be generous? That's what's important. That's the story we want to do. We're not asking, if you ask people to just give you money, if you come at people with, well, our need is $30,000 this year, you've missed the whole point, right? That at some point we're going to display that the need is $30,000 more than last year, because that's all in this information. But look at the ministries we're doing. Look at the things that happen. We don't want to talk about money in the church unless we can tie it to ministry and mission, or we're doing Bible study where our relationship with money is considered in Scripture for us to consider for our own spiritual well-being. Those are the only two times we talk about money. And that with that money is always connected to ministry and mission, that's what we're inviting them to support. And then we can show them what that looks like. Here are in our current church, here are where families spread out with giving. And you can see from less than $500 a year to $20,000 a year or more. These are how many families. So you see the question, will you take the next step? Right? We're not telling you how much to give. We're not trying to divide what we need equally among everybody, because it's not fair for everybody to pay the same, because not everybody has the same capacity. For some folks, an extra $10 a week is really going to stress them, and they're going to have to make decisions about, if they're going to skip a meal or put gas in their tank. For other people, $10 a week wouldn't be missed. That's cigar money, right? I mean, they don't even think about it. They drop $10 a week on all kinds of things. And it's just not fair to we want equal sacrifice, not an equal amount, right? We want equal generosity. Generosity is not a number, it's capacity to give. It's based on my capacity. And then we show people, here's a chart you can use. We really want you to take a step up in the percentage of your giving. And we've kind of broken that down as a part of discipleship. If you're doing 1, 2, or 3%, that's average philanthropy in the United States of America. That's, a little less than 2%, right at 2% is total philanthropy of people in the United States. So this is a great place to start, but this is not where you want to stay, right? We want you to grow. And because when you grow in your giving, your investment grows, your commitment grows, and what you get out of it grows. And there's this funny thing about God's economy. We don't talk too much about this, but I have always found it to be true, that I always get back more than I put in. And as long as I don't embrace the world's scarcity mentality, that there's not enough and I got to hold on to everything I've got. I mean, that's not a biblical theology, right? That's a worldview that doesn't believe in the abundance of the earth, that doesn't trust that if we allow resources to flow, everybody gets what they need, not always what they want, but they get what they need. That's what the church wants to invite people into conversations of thinking about and growing. I like the challenge giving is presented, and notice it goes beyond the tithe, right? That's, as you've grown and you've matured and you're into more deep discipleship. And this is especially important for our leaders. I don't think you ever can run a successful campaign for an annual fund without your leaders being committed 100% to be a part of it. And I always tell people, I don't care what you write on the commitment card at this point, the number's not important. What's important is you turn one in that says, I'm a part of this. In some way, I'm expressing to others that I'm invested and I believe in this. And now I'm inviting them to share with me, as opposed to everybody just pony up, right? If we can say the board, 100% of the board is given, then or has made a commitment. Now we invite you to join us. That's a very different conversation. It's language is so important. Talked about this before, whether I collect an offering or receive an offering, right? The language is different, and the language matters. It's terribly subtle, but it matters, right? And that's a lot of stuff to throw at you, but that's that is what I think is a really fine example of a budget done well, and I will take questions. Let me stop sharing so I can see all of your handsome faces again. Okay. So are there questions about that? Is there any part of that you want to look deeper at? And then we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to show you how they move this back to paper for the board's fiduciary responsibility, but kept the integrity of the mission style budget. Questions?
One question, please.
Yep.
So is there, when, like in your example, which is beautiful, and we so are appreciative of this great information, do they have the one pathways report, or is there a need to cater that for different audiences?
I think they have used that report both in and out of house, if you will. I think it works pretty well for that. Talking about what they do, I've suggested they're doing this year's now. They work on a July 1, June 30 fiscal year, and they're just now rewriting this pathways report for the 24-25 fiscal year. And I've talked with them about including the value of those volunteer hours in that, so that it can have even more impact as an exterior piece and sharing with leadership in the community.
Thank you. And just a curious question, I think, is there a particular role, a person that's producing this? I'm thinking about our treasurer that may, producing this graphic version and narrative version may not be her skill set.
Right.
So is there another particular role that might be in line for that? Or just
Yeah,
anyone who has the skill set?
I would see it as not being one person's responsibility. I would see it as being a team's responsibility because of the nature of what it is. You're going to have one person helping write and collect stories. You're going to have another person trying to draw photographs in and figure out graphically what it's going to look like. I think it's, each area reports, if you will, about what they're doing, and they work with finance with how much time they're taking of staff and property to do it. So the treasurer can give them numbers and they can do their own math, right? Here's the line item budget, and you can see where things are. So if you're trying to figure out how much you're investing in worship as a part of the narrative style, then I'm going to have to do it myself. I'm going to take out 30%, if that's how much time's invested by the senior pastor. I'm going to take out 30% of all these different things in the budget and move them there. And that takes some time. And I'm the kind of guy who'd probably end up with a bunch of sheets of paper and stacks on the desk in front of me to make sure that I get things kind of in the right place. And then, as you'll see in the budget that I show you that they use for their board, there are administrative costs that just really can't easily be assigned, that gets spread across all areas evenly, because all areas draw from some aspect of that, the copier lease or whatever, right? That there are, and I'll show you that in a minute. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Other questions?
Bruce, what you just talked about with the taking a line item and spreading it equally across the areas. When we've done this, we've also done that with our staff just because of how hard it is to quantify hours. Are there drawbacks to doing it that way? If we're taking our staff numbers out, like music and so forth, that stays in the worship part. But for our ministerial staff, we just kind of take that and divide it equally. Also, because with each of us having job descriptions, there are certain areas that I may be responsible for that another minister doesn't really have any time committed to. But that can be optically, that could be an issue if it's, that person spending 1 or 2% in this area. Why isn't that person not doing more evangelism? So trying to think of how to be accurate and faithful in how we quantify that without opening up a can of worms or exposing ministerial staff to potential criticism or scrutiny because of how their time is divided.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of ways to approach that. I still think the time study itself is very important because you will learn things. Your staff will learn things about how they're spending their
This is
time
great.
and
This is
what
great.
it's
Thank you.
invested in. I think the same thing with your property committee.
No, he's in
Um,
charge. I'm just
that
assisting.
I'm gonna mute down there. And I'm uh I think that time study is really important. And you know, if your youth minister is spending 70% of their time in worship and 10% at the hospital, only 20% with worship with kids, then you know that tells you we're out of order, right? I mean, they should be lopsided. Your staff that have special portfolios, they should be lopsided. The senior minister is the only one who usually is going to have a finger in every pot, right? Even if it's a small percentage. But you know, your administrative pastor or your, you know, however you're decided your staff works. I mean, your musicians, I mean, that's loaded into worship. That's what they do. You know, that's what you got them for. Does that help? I mean, that
It does. Is there an instrument to be used for doing that time study, or is it literally just sort of recording, looking at a week or two at a time and just recording hours?
you know, if you've ever been to a diet class, you know, and they say you have to write down everything you eat, and
Yeah.
you go, really? And
Yeah.
and then
I
you
don't do those
realize,
anymore.
really?
Yeah.
This is kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's, oh,
Okay.
I don't want to do this. But you know, you got in the morning and you spent, you know, the first hour on emails, right?
Hmm.
Most of that probably pastoral care, maybe some mission or administration, and you just kind of have to decide, what does that look like? Okay, now I'm closing my door and I'm going to do reading for exegesis for my sermon for 2 hours, you
Hmm.
know, and you just have to say, well, that's what I did with
Hmm.
that block of time. Yes, there are interruptions. Yes, we get distracted and we may do 12 things, and that may then get, you know, that's just administration, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a miscellaneous pool that
Hmm.
that has to go into because
Right.
it's ministry.
Hmm. Okay. Thanks. That's helpful.
Okay. So I want to honor our time. Let me see if I can be clever enough to call up this spreadsheet. And this may not translate as well as I would like it to, but I'm going to give it my best shot. This, I need to make all of you people disappear so I can see it. This is their annual budget. And you'll notice down here, things start to be in colored boxes. So here's that worshiping community, embrace ministry expenses, holy friendship. They're boxed out by color and a total for each area. Um, and this is what they're using now in their board. Notice that I mentioned that administrative costs being spread, the stuff that they couldn't assign well to any particular area, they added all that up and then they divided across those 6 areas. So all 6 areas representatively get an equal share of administrative resources and time. And that's $6,774. But then they've got, you know, their personnel expense allocation for this particular ministry, which I'm showing you now is their sacred purpose ministry. And so when the treasurer is spitting out numbers, that there is this extra step that has to be done to carve. We know now what those percentages are. That's how we came to this. We've kept those percentages in a separate sheet so we can go back and refer to them. That the personnel expense to date, because you're going to do columns, right? You're going to do it's 2023, so you got history, and 2024, so you got current, and then you've got January, February, March, you know, those columns as you work across the spreadsheet, and those are all being assigned so they can see where are we. Some of them are going to be fairly fixed, like personnel and probably property, which may fluctuate some with utilities, et cetera. But as a general rule, those are going to stay the same. But they've got these workshops they do and these hands-on mission projects, and they got to account for all of that. And so as money is spent for that, the board sees that's happening. The board can see every month that, you know, and whether we're running ahead or behind from where we should be, you know, there's budget and there's actual. And if you have the capacity to do spreadsheets this way, if you have the capacity to be able to report this kind of information, it's really important because it's transparent, and this is much easier for a board to digest than 10 or 12 pages of spreadsheet that might be printing out from whatever software you're using, or that a treasurer would say, well, this is a gap standard way of reporting. And it's a spreadsheet of numbers, and everybody, you know, has got to try to figure out what those numbers mean. And this is a way of assigning them to those areas and keeping folks current. This is not detailed enough for the finance committee, who needs a deeper dive, who needs to see more breakdown of line items. But Birmingham has tested this for a year as a way to do their board reporting, because they have a bookkeeper who's a professional bookkeeper, who's, you know, he's an accountant, does gap standards. And their financial reports were literally over 30 pages every board meeting every month. And we know board members aren't going to go through all that most board members, their eyes are going to glass over before they get to the third page. And while that reporting is important, that transparency builds trust with people and says we're doing things like we said we were going to do them, the average person does not need to see it in that detail. This detail is sufficient. It's a way of reporting and being transparent and giving a true picture of where we are and supporting these areas of ministry through the year without overwhelming people. And so you see how they've done it for each of these areas. And I'm happy to send you all links to this information, send you the link on our website to where you'll find the budget, the narrative budget that I'm giving here, and several other examples. There are a lot of examples that, you know, you can choose from as to what's going to make sense in your context and how detailed you want your reporting to be. Where I go to church, they've opted for a, you know, it's an 8.5 by 11 paper horizontal landscape, and it's 3 columns, and so it doesn't say a lot. I would like to see it say more, but it does show you a picture of how resources are organized around their core missional values, which is worship, grow, and serve. And it allows you to see that. And it allows you to see a
Hey,
profile of the congregations give.
hey, Bruce,
Yes, sir.
if you could send me that link along with the PowerPoint,
I
then I'll
will.
make sure that everybody gets a copy of that.
Not all churches are going to have budgets like that, and your reporting is going to be a lot simpler than this, and that's okay. So long as you're remembering you build a budget annually to have a plan for mission and ministry. And you want folks invested in that. You want ownership, you want transparency so they can see what you do. You want to report also because you want to inspire. The idea of this budget is to get people excited about what you do and what difference it makes, rather than how much it costs for pizza for the youth group, right? Again, the kids just want the pizza, and the parents should be just glad that the pizza and the kids are together in the same room at church. So we don't need to argue about how much we're spending on a piece, right? That's just, you know, for a coupon, you can drive 14 miles across town, you can save 50 cents a box. No, we're not going to do that. Questions? And is this helpful today, or is it just more drinking out of a fire hose and feeling overwhelming?
Very helpful. I appreciate it.
Well,
Yeah, we very grateful. Thank you for your time today.
oh, I love doing this. This what y'all pay me to do, and it's fun. I get to meet great people and get to talk about things that can help you do your ministry and mission. I can't think of anything more satisfying than that. I'm going to miss that.
I really liked seeing those concrete examples too. That was wonderful.
Mhm. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send down a link. It'll be to our website, and there'll be a whole section on our website. You can find it yourself. You don't have to wait for Don. But if you go to our website, you can find under leading, I think it is, under that drop-down menu, you'll find how to build a narrative budget. And there's a bunch of articles that are linked out of that front page article you see, and there are links to look at examples. And you can see a dozen examples of how people have built their narratives, how they're similar and how they're different. You look at one, pick out the one you like and try it. And like budgets, which are meant to be managed and have to sometimes be adjusted, your process for doing this, will take some learning time. And I don't expect you to get it right the first year or even the second year, to where you want it. It'll probably take you 2 or 3 or 4 years to get it honed in just the way you want it. And during that time, the first time you present it, be sure you present the line item budget right alongside of it if you're having a congregation vote on it, so nobody thinks you're hiding anything. You'll find the second year, all you need to do is say, we have copies of the line item budget here. The ushers have them, the deacons have them. If you need one, holler out and we'll give it to you. The third year, you can say there's a pile of them outside in the narthex if you want to pick one up on the way out. And by the fourth year, you just say, of course, our budget's available. If you want to see the breakdown in line item forms, contact the financial team and they'll be sure they set you up with what you need. It literally goes that fast. And the narrative is what people want to see because that's what you do. How'd I do, Don?
You did a great
Well,
job,
Bruce-
Bruce. I thank you for the efforts that you've made, and I thank you for the information that you provided. I think we might have to learn to model that at some point, even as a regional budget.
Oh, absolutely.
So that we model it for the congregations as well, or we follow the congregations, whichever way it goes.
Right.
But thank you for that information. I think it's going to prove helpful and beneficial.
You're more than welcome, and I'd strongly recommend that the region take leadership in doing this for your own budget. And Valerie Melvin, Bishop Melvin, has done it in North Carolina. I have not seen the final project. I was involved early in their process. I have not seen the final product, which I'd like to see at some point before I really tell you to go look at it. But I'm going to trust Valerie and their team and say they've got a narrative style budget for the region that you could look at.
Bruce, this is Vion. I just wanted to tell you that I have really appreciated the way you have approached dealing with the subject that most of us don't like, and that is talking about pennies and nickels and how we always are asked to give something to the preacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I really have appreciated the fact that if you push it toward what you're doing and why you're doing it, then it gets us past with all of that. We never did it that way before, or why have we got to do that? Because everybody gets to understand that they have had a blessing as a result of what has been done.
Absolutely.
So I thank you. I thank you a lot, and hopefully I can translate this to the folk at our church in an intelligent way, that they will be drawn to do this and not fight against, well, they say kick against the prick. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, now that's a great idea, Millville Christian Church, that a webinar on strategic planning, and there's a bunch of good people in our church who can do that and lead you in that process. That's a great idea, Don, for you to put on the radar for future resourcing. We are going to meet one more time. Don, I think it's like the 20th of June, isn't it? It's a Thursday night. And we're going to talk about what's next. And that will be my last webinar with you and my last contact with you through this program, unless you take up the offer that goes with this, participating in this, is that if you want a one-on-one conversation for your church specifically with your leaders, I'm happy to have that. I'm happy to Zoom into a meeting. That's a part of what, the grant has paid the center to be able to do.
Hello.
Is to stand by and stand with you in developing these products, right? To have one-on-one time with you.
That is correct. I believe it is June 27th. But it's
27th.
June 20th or the 27th. It's a
Might be
Thursday
the
evening.
27th. I think it's it
Yeah.
was when I looked at the calendar originally, when I thought that might be one of the last official things I do as director of the Center for Faith and Giving.
Well,
But I'm going to be here till 31st of August. So
well, thank you all again for joining us this morning, and we look forward to more time with Bruce, personal time with Bruce, and know that we will be sending out the slides probably by Monday, or soon as I get them. If he gave them to me today, they would get out by Monday. If he gave them to me Monday, they'll get out by Monday or Tuesday, so that
you'll probably
everyone
get
can
them from me
have a
today,
copy.
just so I can
Okay.
take that off my to-do list.
All right. Well, thank you all, and God bless you all.
Thank you all. Peace.